All right, all out family. We are back with another episode. Gita happens to be one of our phenomenal clients inside of our LinkedIn Method Academy, who is actually a humor coach. What I love about the oxymoron of this is that she has a tech company that she's owned for over 17 years and is now out there coaching executives of multi-billion-dollar companies on how they can be infusing humor to be more effective leaders and growing their organization. You guys are not going to want to miss this episode. If you've not thought about the energetics of humor and how it could be impacting you positively or negatively, if you're lacking it in the workspace, you are going to want to listen in. I am one who loves to bring you guys episodes around how you can grow your business without focusing specifically on business strategy, but things around it. And this is something energetically that can truly transform your business. I hope that her story inspires you as well, with starting a company at the age of 30, now having it run by itself, her IT tech company, able to travel to Antarctica, do what she wants, and launch a whole nother business. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Need some effective, tactical advice that actually helps you get results and makes a real difference in your life and business? You've come to the right place. If you're finding yourself here today, it means you're getting ready to gain serious traction in your business, rapidly multiply your income and impact, and you're ready to make it happen while living all out. Guys, I'm Melissa Hinault, your trustworthy corporate dropout turned six-figure business burnout turned happy and healthy CEO of a multi-million-dollar online business. And you're listening to the Burnout to All Out podcast. On this show, we're serving up innovative growth strategies, simple implementation methods to put them into practice, and action-stimulating inspiration tailored specifically for the modern entrepreneur. Let's dive in. And we are live. So excited to have this interview with humor coach and expert Gita Kulkarni today on the Burnout to All Out podcast. So excited to have you today. Welcome, Gita.
Thank you. Thanks, Melissa, for having me. I'm obviously a raving fan of your work. I literally was a LinkedIn hermit prior to, and no joke, like literally and metaphorically, I was a hermit on this thing before I found your ways. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad you're here. So yeah, let me do the informal bio first, because Gita is actually a student in our LinkedIn Method Academy and also in our business basics. I believe you're coming into that as well, right? And so what I love amongst a million things about my business is that we get exposed to some of the coolest entrepreneurs that come through our program. And I'm like, humor coach, that I have not heard. We have to bring her on to the podcast so people can hear about this. You're just such a shining light inside the program too. And you share, you give, you engage, and you're just one of the reasons the community is incredible. And I'm excited for my audience to get to learn more about you and what you do today. I think that your story around entrepreneurship is going to be a lot of fun to unpack. And then also just your insights and expertise around humor and how it could be impacting our business if we don't have enough of it, right? And maybe some tips and tricks around it. So with that, quick backstory. So Gita is a humor coach that helps people find and express their sense of humor to be more productive and effective at work and at life. She works with leaders, teams, and in partnership with other coaches. Humor lives in all of us. Sometimes it takes a little grease and mind work to find and cultivate it. Gita also uses a variety of exercises she calls humor reps. Maybe we can go through one today. I don't know. To help a person find their funny. Who needs to find their funny? So Gita has experience learning improvisation at the Second City in Chicago. She also operates and founded Avinta Services, which is a 17-year technology firm, which to me sounds like an oxymoron with humor. So we'll get to that. Most of her practice and perfection of humor originated from basic human survival in kindergarten class and has carried her on in her training of 30,000 people globally. If it weren't humor, she would not be standing. So such a fun bio to read and want to get into this. So let's just start with the backstory. So where did you find that humor was the backbone of success? Like, how did this come to be?
I mean, Melissa, it began pretty soon in my childhood. It showed up pretty quickly. I will say I grew up in a small town in Louisiana back in the 80s, and everybody just paint that picture in your head. And I looked a little different than everyone. We went to a private Catholic school, and I'll say we weren't like the richest people in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I really found that I had to kind of work against those things. And all I had in my arsenal was just, I didn't have dollars and I didn't have anything I could trade other than my personality and interactions like that to kind of gain and diffuse the audience or whoever I was talking to from a social status or, something else. And that was something I wasn't, right? And so humor was always the thing that, whether I was, I kid you not, in kindergarten or I was in my workplace settings, that was a thing that I would use. I think it truly was a survival skill tactic for me to kind of use humor to kind of diffuse and move us away from what we aren't to what we are together. So,
yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. And I'm going to have so much fun unpacking this. And I even think about, even back in my corporate days, some of the best advice I got with like stage fright and like stepping on stage in front of thousands of people in corporate America with training was just to like, go ahead and make a joke about yourself the moment you get on stage.
Yes.
Right? And diffuse all of that stress. Let people know you're nervous as shit, right? Like get it out. Yes. Let's all take a deep breath because I needed that, right? Like,
yes, right? It really, there's so much to it. There's a psychology, there's actually a chemical side to this, which is truly, I'm a nerd in its most classic form, even though I'm a humorist. I do study stuff to many different, let's say, levels. But to your point, when you go out to an audience and you were smart about it, when you actually bring that audience to, yes, you're doing two things. We all operate, especially in the workplace today, from a place of somewhat of stress, basal stress. And you are actually shutting down pathways that kind of produce that cortisol and that movement of stress inducing hormones. And in place on that same, let's say, pathway, the release of endorphins. Mm-hmm. And so you are doing something. So the faster you can get to shutting off the stress and repurposing it with positive endorphins, you are doing it for yourself and you're doing it for your audience. And their reception to whatever you're about to say will increase. It's a multiplier effect. So it's a and believe it or not, there's a lot of intelligence to you. You kind of are like, I'm going to take this away from just me. I'm going to take it to you. And there's a lot of psychology around that, right? And you're kind of moving the shift in the focus because everybody's expecting. The world expects one thing. And when you show up as a different kind of, you diffuse, you bring that to a different place and a place of pleasure, it does so much for you.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So good. Okay, gang, we need to take a quick hydration break. So grab your drink of choice. And as you rehydrate, I'll give you the lowdown on my free LinkedIn lead gen masterclass. If you feel like you're screaming into the void when you post content on Facebook or Instagram, struggling to find a sustainable and scalable lead generation process that sticks, and you just want someone who's been there and done that to reveal their secrets, then it's critical that you register to save your spot ASAP. During this live masterclass, you'll get to steal the exact strategy I used to scale my income from $0 to $1 million in just 19 months without spending a fortune on ads or suffering from burnout. Simply check out the show notes of the podcast episode for the link to register for your free spot in the LinkedIn Lead Gen Masterclass. And don't worry, even if you miss a couple of days or you can't make it to all the training sessions, we'll deliver the replays directly into your inbox daily so you can watch them on your own time. All you have to do is make sure you sign up for the masterclass before registration ends. And I even remember, people look at me with a business online. I'm on Zoom all the time. I'm on podcasts. I talk all the time. But I hosted my very first live event ever last year. And I had built a business for 3 years, having never met face-to-face any of my clients because it was the middle of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember being terrified to this was me last year to step on stage in front of 100 people And I know that like making a joke out of it, like literally coming on stage and being like, holy crap, like I've met all of you guys on computer screens, but I was a little nervous to step on this stage and like have this conversation with all of you physically here. It's like, just disseminate it, let it out. Right. And then all of a sudden your whole body is like, okay, like I talked about the elephant in the room, right?
You did. Yeah. And people want to hear that. I mean, especially in this day and age, we're so ripe and receptive to real. And it's just, it does a lot. It's really kind of why I built this business, right? Because people need to hear the real. There's so much where, operating out. I don't know if it was the pandemic or if it was just, but we operated in a completely different vortex. And it's funny how we show up, and people still do this. We can show up differently in work than we do in our personal lives. And if we take some of that playfulness and mindset that we have and just bring it to the workplace, again, the right stuff, right? The right positive aspects of it, you can actually do momentous things. So kudos to you, right? I mean, the audience wants that. I spend a lot of work, believe it or not, with CEOs doing that type of work where they're showing their real, because the stories of their real, it's kind of like when you told that story, you're like, look, I've met many of you on screens and now I'm coming into the real life. People are like, it's funny and it's real and it's raw and it makes you accessible, which even augments your status and your platform as somebody that disseminates knowledge. So anyway, yeah.
So good. Okay. So I'm going to take a hard right for a second and we're going to come back to humor. But can we just talk about the fact that you started a tech company 17 years ago? Like, were you 5? Like,
right. I was 7. Yes. No, I don't know if it's just the look, but I think it has to do with the fact that I'm a runner. And I think that has something to do with it, but I did start it I started it right at the tip of almost 30. It was a technology business. And like I said, when I was younger, I don't know what it is. Maybe I think some of the things that we do today, even in our most successful things, come and kind of shine themselves a little bit when we were younger. And so I always had this kind of building mindset where I wanted to build things for people. So that's how I founded this technology company where I am implementing, technology solutions for companies, which are highly complex. But in that work and in complexity lies the need for more of this kind of levity, if I call it, right? You want to be fun about it. People are so stressed. People are nervous about failing. And if you just kind of do good work to kind of pepper in, hey, it's okay, it's safe, we're having fun doing this, it does add levity it actually produces better results. And I've noticed that with my work over the 17 years. I mean, that's how, whether it was, and everybody's scared, whether you're the CEO or you're an individual sales contributor, everybody is scared of change and they live in fear. And how's this going to make my life better or worse? Will it? That's probably one of the fundamental questions everybody asks when something new comes across their desk. So the more you can kind of invigorate it with humor, the better you are, right? So that, I think that became, I'll say Vinton, I still operate that business, is a strong platform for kind of things that I experiment with.
Yes.
And it brings in the humor stuff.
So let's talk about this. I'm really curious. So what were you doing at 30? Mm-hmm. And what was the motivator to take the leap to launch your own business? Like, what did that look like?
At 30, when I started my Vinton business. So it was a pretty fascinating story. I graduated from business school and I was working for a company, and my dad, I think some of this has to do with my dad had a business and he was like, why don't you take this bet? I think I was a little bit, I'll call it young, dumb, and naive, but to a good degree, he's like, why don't you just take a second and bet on yourself and try to see if you can build a business? And I was like, okay, well,
that's incredible. Is your dad an entrepreneur?
He is. Yeah.
Okay.
He owns a consulting business as well. So a lot of that kind of was like, and I was like, I'm 30. I mean, if I can do this at any point in my life, I can do it. At that point, it made a lot of sense for me. All I had was like maybe a plant I was endowed to. No children, not even a pet. So if I could take care of a plant in my apartment, I was doing good. And so that was my, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And I actually kept myself at a pretty tight leash. I told myself, I'm going to take this at 3 months. And if I can I was pretty protracted about it. I'm like, the horizon is 3 months. My income level has to be what I'm matching at an annualized basis plus 30% more. And I knocked that out of the park at like a month and a half in. So I was like, okay.
So can we just pause? I love this. You had a definitive financial plan. It wasn't like an expensive hobby. You had a definitive financial plan of what you needed to hit in order to make this a legitimate business and continue betting on yourself. I love this. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And I wrote that at outset, right? I was like, okay, because a lot of times you can kind of, I've even noticed this as I've looked at other endeavors, even in my life, I'm like, I need to come back to like that place and start and go, okay, this is where I need to be at a financial and a time horizon basis. That was just a strong, thing. Yeah. So from there, I was working much like your story where I was actually had a job and I said, okay, I'm going to let that I'm going to subset and offset that with this new business and let that be my kind of movement to transition out of the full-time work. And that's what I did. And when I did it, I was truthful to my employer. Like, I'm going to go out and freelance. I'm going to bet on myself and my farm and we're going to do this,
Yeah.
And he was like, look, I understand what this means. I'm going to hand over a couple of clients to you because I want you to be successful. Right. So he was a serial entrepreneur. I just had a lot of like stars align. And I think I will say for anybody who's doing this or who's looking at entrepreneurship, I mean, two things, like you said, be calculated about it, I believe, because you can kind of get lost.
Yes.
I believe. Yeah. And you kind of lose sight of like, what was the original goal? And
right.
Sometimes you're living in this place of pain and you're you're kind of in a place of misdirection unless you have some of these North Stars with you. So I'll say that. And then on the flip of that, I think truth works, and I think if you're telling it to the right audience and you're saying, hey, I'm leaving for these reasons, I mean, they will wish you and send you on your way with the best,
right.
So
I love that. Okay. So you bet on yourself, you left and you launched a tech company that has run for 17 years. So you have been independently employed, like running your own business for 17 years. Is this business still like running parallel to launching your coaching business?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. How have you been able to kind of pull yourself out of the day to day and given yourself bandwidth to launch the humor coaching while your tech business is still running?
Yeah. So this was a fascinating experiment for me. And this is going to sound like I'm smoking a cigar or a long thing. Like, it's going to sound a little, but please, anybody, let's just suspend that for like 2 hyperseconds. What it took for me is going on 2 trips, vacations, and just putting my team into a place where they're running the work. I was pretty calculated about making sure, I was 17 years in and I knew I was going to actually go out and launch a secondary business that was going to take a ton of my time and thought leadership to actually develop. So I sat down a year in front of that decision and I said, okay, what is it going to take to put my team in a place of autopilot as much as they can be? And what's my role going to be? I did a little bit of, intentional design about what I wanted the business to look like and what I wanted my involvement to be. I couldn't pull myself 100% out of that work. I knew I'd be involved at some degree, but to what degree I could, so. And I'm a lot of it type A. So it's hard for me to lead and not get worried about where things are. But it took me, I literally went to Antarctica, like the most remote place in the entire world. And I did it in January. I did a kind of an absence in in November. And I went to Iceland, which was just to get, I still had internet connectivity. And the team ran well, right? They operated and I was only out for like a week and a half. And then I went to Antarctica and I was out for a good solid 2, almost 3 weeks. And that really, I didn't have internet. Like it was me and whales and seals and ice. And that was the moment which my team really had to kind of step up, rise to the occasion. I did prepare my customers and it kind of put me in a place where the team was sustainable. And it also allowed, I will say, me to kind of rise away from a lot of this and give the team more responsibility, which I think they wanted,
Right. That's so good. It's interesting you share that. One of my good friends, Justin, who's in a business mastermind I'm in, I interviewed him not too long ago, and he said something very similar. He's launched and run 4 different businesses now, and he's in his 30s. It's pretty fascinating. And he said one of the things he does about twice a year is he goes away for like a month just to see what breaks on purpose so that he can find the cracks in his business so that he can come back and make sure that, it's self-sustaining. And I was like, beautiful. You have to have the confidence to be able to walk away and do that. Right. And have a good team and know, a good foundation before you
were absolutely right. And that's why I was out in Iceland, Norway in November, because it was kind of my trial run to see those break points. And then I went full Monty in January because I was like, okay, we can do this, right?
So absolutely. Good. Okay. So you've been able to create the bandwidth. Now you're launching this new business. So what gave you the light bulb, the vision to take action and launch this humor stuff? And then we'll get into the humor. What gave you the vision to make space for this and make it a legitimate coaching business?
I think the big driving force, and I guess it'll come down to, it's not just men or it's not just men or women, but I saw a lot of women who would show up as one person in work and show up as a different person in play. And I'm like, and when I got to know a lot of my clients and how they operated, and I got to know them at that fundamental level and they're funny, I was like, we need to take some of this and re-yield it in the workplace. And I would even, a lot of the work that I would do, I would often find a protege in the work, and it just happened to be men or women. And I would, because I was funny in my delivery, they would actually pull out their own funny in their own delivery as I rolled off work for my client, and they would kind of almost take the same culture or the same approach that I took and do that in work. And that was kind of my thing. I was like, there's something here. And like I said, I'm also a big believer in this notion of a growth mindset. I'm so glad we discovered it back at some point recently in modern time, where you can do anything if left to the devices of your mind. It's a powerful, powerful muscle. And I saw a lot of it in productivity for my running. And I'd say, if I can take the same rigor and the same concept of humor and just reapply those concepts to cultivate people, that was kind of my inspiration for forming the Humor Edge.
I love this. Okay. So let's get into the humor. Can you give us some tips, some tricks, what we can do as leaders with teams? Let's go there first. And then maybe we'll talk about marketing and messaging. And is there a way to fold the humor in there? But especially with LinkedIn, right? Because you and I are both we like to play on LinkedIn. And I personally find that humor actually works well on LinkedIn. And the average person is like wearing a mask. So we'll get into that in a minute. But some insights, tips, tricks for running a business as the leader, because I know you're working with some executives one-on-one right now, which is awesome. You're helping them be more funny, right? Why? What's the value?
Yeah. Well, so value of humor. So huge. One is that it increases your perception in the mind of the average, I shouldn't say it for lack of a better word, average mortal, mere mortal. We actually give points to the person that is funny, appropriately funny, more so than we would to somebody who doesn't. In fact, I'll even cite, there are studies that were done by Robert Half. 98% of employers appreciate a candidate in front of them that has some sense of humor. They will actually go towards the advancement of hiring that person because that means that they're personable. It does a lot. So that, number one, it does augment status. It also shows vulnerability, because when you do that, you're obviously humor. And it also shows that intelligence, vulnerability, and it just shows that you're persistent, you're resilient. You can actually roll with the punches. We will not, every day of work and every day of interacting with a human being will not always be sunshine and rainbows. So this is what humor really imparts, is that reality to whether you're a person and you're in a team, or whether you're a leader and you're guiding a team. These things are very important in this day and age. A lot of why people have anxiety in work is because of people. And the more you can show that reality and through a lens of levity, you're actually painting yourself in a great place. A lot of CEOs, and the reason that I coach a lot of CEOs in this, because they get that credibility and that get that kind of status amongst their peers, amongst those that they're leading. And when, especially as a leader, when you show up and paint and show the right stories to your team as to who you are and why you are who you are, they will be that much more inspired to do work, right? You may have great things going on in the business, you have the most innovative products, but if they don't know who you are and why you are, it sometimes falls flat, right? I want to work for the guy that I recently had a CEO that talked about his true rags to riches story, where he was actually, his parents helped with, they were custodians in the school. He's a multi-billion-dollar CEO, and he'd go to school, he'd work, go to school during the week. He'd see kids splatter ketchup. He'd see kids spray on the paint walls in the bathroom. And he knew that Saturday he had to go out and clean all that. And he was thinking to himself, and he talked about leadership, and he said, you know what, ever since I was 6 years old, I knew I didn't want to clean up anybody's mess. Imagine telling that story. Imagine not knowing that story, right? And knowing that you're just doing what you're doing for this big company. Now, imagine that leader has told you that story. It takes a whole different level of eminence. You will do and rise to the occasion for that CEO. He's never told that story to his company. And that's a story that he's now going to share, So anyway, it's stories like this. I give the advice to a lot of people I will say that humor is this performative effect, whether, I show up as Kevin Hart, I have to show up as Ellen DeGeneres, I have to show up as whatever comedian, Amy Schumer, name your favorite comedian. It's not that. It's actually the humor that's kind of in the gap. It's kind of in the everyday where you just kind of pop a joke in context to what you're doing. So a lot of people have this kind of conception that humor has to be, I call it performative, and it doesn't. You can show up and be hilarious. And there are many people that do it not in that limelight, right? And that's where you're still funny, right? And so I tell a lot of my managers, start with the story, find out something unique about yourself, or discover something that was kind of a guiding light, and tell that story. And I follow something called a story spine, which if you followed any Disney movie, once upon a time, there lived a, and then you kind of go towards a bend, and then you kind of talk about why you did what you did. Then you talk about why you did what you did again. And then you kind of end it with your lesson learned. And it's a very simple framework. And I tell my leaders to do that story spine. In fact, that's the story spine that my CEO had used when he was, we were walking through that work. And you will find funny in that. You'll lace it with a base story, because everybody loves a good story, whether you were 1,600 years ago living with a campfire or you're today.
Right.
And that's what people latch on to. So, I say start with that. Start with kind of protected humor, I call, or things that you can kind of plan for. Have it always in your back pocket. Share that whether you're with your troops or even at a dinner party. People want to know something fascinating about you, or you have a funny story that, happened between yourself and somebody in the family. That's the stuff that you can kind of start to practice your humor with, planned humor to some degree. And then you will start to identify within yourself your humor. And I also think it's a great move for a manager to employ that tactic, because it shows that realism, and it shows then the team wants to work with somebody that's real and has got a really great story behind them. So,
gosh, this is so timely, talking about like storytelling and humor. And I don't know, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but I was just chatting about this in a small group coaching session prior to this. I talk a lot about storytelling and share your story and be relatable on LinkedIn. Like, be willing to share your warts and all. Like, people actually appreciate that. You become more authentic. People connect with you. People who are listening may or may not have heard my story, but what I will share was, last year at my very first live event that we talked about at the beginning, I worked with marketing strategist for the runway of the whole event for months up to the event. And she helped me build my deck, if you will, or pitch for our mastermind. We open the doors to our mastermind from stage at the live event. And she was like, my story. I'd had such a tumultuous year the year before where I literally had hit rock bottom. Like, I had made $1 million, but I was still in the red. And she was like, you have to tell this story from stage. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you must relate with them to the pain point and share the ugly girl crying on the bathroom floor story. And then we take you out of that and tell the rest of the story, right? And I was terrified to reveal the imperfection and the tragedy and the loss. But what I found through all of it, and maybe you can speak to this, is it was one of the most profound stories I could have told, because after that, I got so many pings, dings, phone calls from people who were like, I am so in and cannot wait to be a part of this program. And what got me was your story of like crying on the bathroom floor, because I've been there. And I'm like, holy crap. So like, it is important to like tell these stories, and I can laugh about it now. And it was I actually had tears about it when I was telling it. But by the end of the story, I was laughing and smiling, and there was some humor about the journey I had taken, right? Can you speak more to that? because
Yes.
I was so uncomfortable being coached to do it. But now I'm like, now I do it every day. I share it with everyone my flaws all the time.
Yes. 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 It's a meet you where you are. They're meeting you where you were. I almost equate it to like a highway. Life's a highway, let's say maybe.
Yeah.
And if I can get on the same ramp that you are, I'm going to be able to, and you were at that ramp, you were at that exit ramp, and now you're in a different place. Like, I know that that's possible. There's the art of the possible. There's the power of the possible. And that's what people want. And they, to some degree, I mean, how do I say this without sounding so negative? The world can be a painful place, and the more, and many people are in, let's say, pain. And the more they know that you've kind of been there and seen that pain, the more they know it's possible to move out of that place,
Mm-hmm.
And in that story, you're going to find your humor, which, was an aside there, but that's a huge, it's very contemporary these days. And it's a very resonant effect. People want to hear those stories. Imagine if you were at, you were your unicorn self riding along in the clouds, spewing rainbows all day long. And you're like, come on, ride with me. It's not real. Right. And you can't get on I can't get on your unicorn. You're already up there. Like, that's what it's not relatable. And that's what makes it so real, is that I'm so glad and you're right. I mean, that's even how I engage with you. I saw the realism in you. I saw a lot of me in you. And I saw like the way you signaled a lot of that was, it's not been, sunshine and lemonade all day long every day. Right. And that really hit home with me, because I'm like, you know what? I'm trying to do something that I perceive as impossible. And she's making it possible. She's turning impossible to possible. And that's it. People get sold a lot on that, so.
I love that. It just is reiterating to me, and maybe we can now segue into kind of marketing strategies with humor and, how we can be folding more of this into our ethos. Both have to run our brands and be a brand online. How are you playing with this? I know that you're in our academy on LinkedIn. How are you playing with humor, and what are some advice that you can give our listeners with humor and kind of brand strategy marketing online?
Two things. I mean, one thing I'll leave you with, I'll kind of place out there is humor. It's a great unifier and it's a great personalizer. I'm trying to think. I always use the concept of Ted Lasso because I feel like a lot of people watch Ted Lasso. So, and you're smiling. So you probably have seen some of those. So the story, if you think about Ted Lasso, is that he is funny, but the reasons you find him funny, and if somebody were to ask you, hey, Melissa, why is Ted Lasso funny? You're gonna have a different answer than I will. But that's great and okay. But you know what it does? It also shows that we're common and we're unified, right? So like I said, if you can weave humor into your messaging, people will take and latch onto that and feel the story, because like I said, humor is a great personalizer as it is a great unifier, right? So you can say many things with saying just very little, and do that in the spirit of humor. So if you almost, so I'll leave you with that one piece. I also feel like I tend to comment, I tend to show up a lot with humor, especially for those of you who are building your online presence and you're using LinkedIn to do it. As much as I can, I try to incorporate humor into my messaging. People, like you said, people will respond on a post and even look at other people's comments when they're funny. I mean, it gets people's attention, like you said earlier, right? I mean, it's great to kind of re-herald the king when he makes the comment. Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am. But when you tell them a very, like, you kind of come out with a really kind of good, and I say, it's an intersection of good, clairvoyant observation, comment, and funny. When you can do that and reaffirm what they're saying, man, you get a lot. I get a lot of people who come back to me and, like you said, will look and be like, that was a good line. Who is she? And they'll follow. Right. So I use it there. But like I said, also just even in your messaging, when you're kind of assembling posts or even just building your brand, I think it's also easier on you. You do enter a flow state when you exhibit humor, which means that you're kind of you're releasing, not to be nerdy about it, but the gamma-3 globulin, thing.
Yeah, get nerdy with me. I love nerd. I have a doctorate in pharmacy. Let's go there.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, I mean, you're releasing something that you're releasing when you're in a meditative state. It's easier on the mind. I mean, it's easier on the mind to actually read something that's light and enjoyable, and you'll digest it more than you will, and you will remember it more. That's the other thing that CEOs, they want to deliver with memorable messages. because it matters, so there's just a lot of subtext benefits that the humor affords you that you just,
I mean, this is really
the humor drink or the not.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is really important for those of you who are listening. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is like, if your content is super dry and straight to the point all the time, consider starting to infuse some humor into it, right? If you're seeing that there's not a lot of engagement, consider infusing some humor into it. This is going to be, it's interesting. I guess I would love your thoughts on this because you've kind of alluded to it a little bit. I'm kind of intermingling humor versus just being your authentic self. To me, I think everyone's got some humor in them. They're just filtering it for fear of like maybe what others will think of their humor. So to me, like being humorous and being our authentic self are kind of coincide. I use cuss words and that's just like also a part of who I am. And what I've learned about that is, or I guess where I'm going with this is what I found about myself is that by not trying to be something different, but rather just being exactly who I am. And when I occasionally drop a 4-letter word or tell a joke or say something like raw and real about myself, it actually requires way less energy of me to be me than it did in the past trying to filter who I thought the world wanted me to be. And that's really fucking exhausting.
Yes. Try like 17 years back in my other business. Yeah, that's exactly what this was like. Founding the Humor Edge was like cathartic for me because at moments I was, to your point, it actually takes like twice as much energy, if not more, to be like the split bifurcated personality that you
right?
Yes.
It's almost like then you have more energy left to do other epic shit, right? And not be so filtered. And what I find is that then you magnetize more the people that you want and you repel the people you wouldn't want to sit and have dinner with anyway.
Yes.
Right?
It's just like when rehearsal. So you're coming out of this. That is exactly it, right? You're feeding more of what you need. And to your point, that tribe that you're looking for is coming with you. And that's a beautiful thing. Not everybody's going to be on your bandwagon. And that's fine and okay, because those that are in your tribe, because you're using and eliciting your right humor and your right authenticity will in fact come to you. And it'll give you that much more status, I won't say status, but that much more platform and confidence within to be that person.
100%. And I think that's one observation we made at our live event last year is so many people who came to the event said, I have never been in a room where everyone was family. There were no cliques and like people were just being themselves. And I think it starts from the top. Like if you're a magnet to attract people to be their authentic selves, then when you get in a room, that's the expectation. And then there's so much more authenticity and human connection that happens. And like, I would rather that than have 10 times as many people in the room that are the wrong people and the wrong energy,
Right.
Yeah.
When it's kind of like when you're one thing, if you're everything to everybody, then you're nothing to everyone, right?
Yeah.
That's it's that same, and it does. I mean, you can see it in your ethos that you are who you are. And that does it. It reverberates through the team. It reverberates through your programming. I also, like me, I'll say from a purchasing point of view for your product or anyone else's, I had a very clean line and a very straight direction on what you represented and also what you did, which was a good thing, right? So because also from a servicing perspective, how would you like? I was like, oh yeah, I think I got sold a bag of goods, and it's not exactly the bag of goods that I want, right? Could you? Then you have to customer service me, and that's going to cost you 100% operational costs. There's so much. I mean, be intentional, find it, and for me, I will say and for many of us, they're out there in this world today, some of us have been wearing this, they're like, I'm here. I'm sure it's down there somewhere. I just got to keep looking, you have, and it's going to take a bit of time, but I will say, I do the reps. I'm like, go out and look at, just think, go out and find people that are like you, that whether it's, somebody that's famous, or there's somebody that's not. I write a bit on different types of humor that's out. Tina Fey, Kelly River, everybody, there's a lot of humor out there. And if you can find something that resonates with you, you can start to untap it, especially if it's really buried within, but I will tell you, when you find it, like you said, it does so much to make your life better, not just on the work front, but on the home front, so.
So good. So good. Well, Gita, this has been such a awesome interview. So where can people find you? And if people want to work with you, what do you have going on?
Yeah. So I will say my most active platform, kudos to you, is LinkedIn. You can schedule a consult with me. I'm happy to, I do coaching with women, emerging leaders. I do the coaching with teams where I'm helping them use humor. And I'll say it's not just unicorns and rainbows. It is, in fact, the humor where we're actually working through problems and using it to solve like what's impossible in the business. So we're doing real life stuff. So schedule a consult with me through LinkedIn. I am present on Instagram and Facebook, but I will say that my modus operandi, my primary way of connecting is through the LinkedIn platform. So, and I have a website, The Humor Edge.
Yes. Awesome. And you're coming to our live event in Nashville, right? Are you coming?
I think so. I'm trying to figure out because I'm kind of at the mercy of a couple clients that are asking me, work.
Gotcha.
So I'm like, let's see where this lands relative.
So I won't overpromise our listeners that you will definitely be there, but there's a chance if you want to meet Gita, there may be a chance to meet her in Nashville in a couple of months. Awesome. Okay. So what is your LinkedIn handle so people can come find you if they're...
I think it's just LinkedIn, maybe Gita Kulkarni. So my name.
Perfect. And it'll be in the show notes and the website.
thehumoredge.com.
Okay. You guys heard it. It'll all be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming in today. And just first of all, being a shining light to entrepreneurship and betting on yourself in your 30s to like launching a business. You're an inspiration that you can launch a business, run a business, and keep the business running while you walk away and launch something else. Such an inspiration. And I think that now this is like 2.0 for you, like how you're making even bigger impact with what you're doing now is so cool. So with that, just thank you so much for being here today. And if you guys love this episode, come find her, check her out, learn from her on how you can be infusing more humor into your life, into your content, into your business. And with that, Gita, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, guys, so much for listening in on today's podcast episode. I can't wait for you to see my upcoming guest in the next episode. You are going to love this keynote speaker. Hey, here's the deal. If you liked this, please subscribe and leave a review. And you want the latest online business growth strategies and exclusive LinkedIn pro tips sent straight to your phone? Text the word updates to 1-833-310-7171. Again, text the word updates to 1-833-310-7171. Can't wait to see you guys. Come find me over on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you like to hang. Cannot wait to hear how you are enjoying and applying what you're learning. You guys reach out to me over on social because I love hearing what's resonating with you. When you reach out to me and you send me those personal DMs, they really do impact the content I continue to bring forward to you. So again, come find me, Melissa_Hinault over on Instagram, Melissa Hinault over on LinkedIn and Facebook. Can't wait to see you guys over there.